let's talk about Microsoft's new silicon. I started this, I teased this. By the way, anyone out there, not only is he handsome, but he's also a celebrity around the parts of Microsoft. Apparently, he gave some good advice at some point about silicon, because we did this podcast at the beginning of the week, and the silicon folks were in the room, and I couldn't get them to stop cornering Pat. There was like 6 of them, and they were all around him, and they were taking photos like Japanese paparazzis, and they were all, yeah, you're really good. And then I was like, hi, I'm Dan. And they were like, oh. And then they just turned right back around, talked to Pat some more. I'm like, hey, I talk about chips too. The other guy was like, yeah, I've never heard of you before. But the this has been a big transformational year for Microsoft. You know, we sort of have a debate, or I have a debate about the kind of buy, you know, participate through buying, participate through innovation and development. Google and AWS have each entered their sort of silicon making in a different way. Google's really been kind of ground floor building. You know, they've done a lot of acquisitions, but we all know that AWS, and you and I spent some time with Annapurna, bought an Israeli company that had some really efficient, chip design, development, and building, and that's become Inferentia, Trainium, and of course, they've also spent a number of years in-house building Graviton. Microsoft was kind of later to the party. They bought into OpenAI, which was an amazingly smart move. They basically now started developing their own silicon much later. I mean, they've done stuff with Xbox and stuff. It's not like they've never been in this space, but when it comes to general purpose computing, network NIC and switching, offload DPU, security silicon, and having talked to Satya, the take that I got, and again, can't really say much on the record of what he said, but the very genericized take is they're going to build silicon where silicon makes sense. And they're going to think about it through acceleration, whether it's DPU boost for storage and performance efficiency, whether it's HSM for, on hardware encryption security. It's always better to harden with both software and hardware where you can. Makes a lot of sense. Working on, the NIC business. And then, of course, we know they did Maya and Cobalt. And so those were the general purpose. So, but the new stuff, the Boost DPU and the HSM were the two big sort of new exciting things. I don't have the specs right off the top of my head, Pat, but I think it was something like 4 times more efficient, 3 times more performant on storage offload with the DPU Boost. And Pat, you tweeted something to kind of give a bit more detail that you talked to that. And then, like I said, HSM was really about putting on hardware encryption, which is something that, right now with all the innovation in AI and how fast it's moving, I think adding security for, every server that's hardware driven, not just software driven, is going to be of a ton of value. But hardware where it's needed, I expect this to be the beginning, not the end. Every company has to be thinking about how to augment the Nvidia demand, augment the Nvidia reliance. It's not a displace, replace. This isn't one of those great headlines. They're going to replace them with Maya. No, they're not. But they are going to look at where vertically integrating hardware, software makes more sense, creates more efficiency. And in certain places, like a customer service bot, they can do it inference a lot cheaper if they build it on their own hardware. And that seems to be where they're going.
As an analyst, I have no favorites. I pick no favorites, but the level of competition is amazing, from the hyperscalers to the merchant silicon providers. I really like the way that Satya laid it out, right? Before he came into silicon, he essentially talked about the end-to-end optimization that they make everywhere. And throughout technology history, right, we have aggregation and disaggregation, and we're in this aggregation point because the efficiencies required to pull this off at the lowest amount of power, at the highest performance, it forces you to get more integrated. And whether that's, that's literally from the walls. Microsoft makes their silicon bets based on the outside of the walls of the data center in. So it's the data center cooling and power and the density. It's silicon, the networking, the storage, and the software. And I do love this approach. I feel like AWS told the first story related to this for hyperscaler, but adding Boost DPU and HSM is they filled it out now, right? With their own first party silicon. That's not that they offer something for everything. They don't, but I feel like adding HSM and Boost were two things that they had been buying from. And by the way, I do believe that doesn't mean that Marvell, I do believe, is the company that they worked with on this HSM chip. Check out X or LinkedIn, right? There was a press release, I think in August, talking about them working with Microsoft on it. And I do think there's correlation there. Microsoft bought in 2023 a company called Fungible. And I think that's the team that cranked out this DPU. So I might be remiss in saying that from a merchant silicon standpoint, there were two very important announcements that were made. We mentioned this in the NVIDIA earnings piece, but NVIDIA Blackwell and Azure they actually announced the instance of it, GB200 v6 VM. And that was a big deal. They're saying that they are first. I will take them at their word. And then with AMD, it was Azure HB5, and this is an AMD based instance for high performance computing. So it's great to see the company continuing to get even more serious about first party silicon and bringing innovation out there. And yes, it was great when the designers, the developers of all this great technology literally came in with a bag of chips and laid them out on the table. And we took pictures of them and we took selfies. And it was fun.
Well, it's a great, and by the way, great rounding out. I'm glad that you talked about the build out of the full data center and how that all comes together, because I think a lot of people don't appreciate that this trillions of capex expected to be spent in the coming years isn't just the chips.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not. You got to buy real estate. You got to build buildings. You got to buy racks. You got to run cables and optics and heat and thermals.